Hey friends, so today in this video we're going to talk about sickness, healing from sickness, preventing sickness, just general health and wellness going into these fall and winter months. Now what I'm sharing in this video is not going to be super profound. It's more or less going to be encouraging and hopefully giving you some confidence in healing your family more naturally, not relying so much on the outside sources. Our culture is so dependent on the outside medical world these days, and I just don't think it's always necessary. It's not always necessary. I'm so thankful that we have the medical world when we need it, but for the most part, a lot of the sicknesses that we come in contact with, we shouldn't have to outsource something from the medical world. More or less going to give you encouragement from one mom to another. A lot of times I just need some encouragement from someone else that I have the ability, I have the intuition to help my family heal naturally and to keep them healthy naturally without all these other outside things, without the pressure from the world coming at me. So that's what this video is going to be about. So let's first talk about prevention. If you can prevent your family from getting sick in the first place, when they come in contact with someone who has a sickness, an illness, and then you're like, oh goodness, we're going to have this sickness in a couple of days, I better be watching out, but your family stays healthy, that's ultimately the goal here. We want to be able to prevent sickness in the first place. We want to have strong, healthy bodies, our children to have strong, healthy bodies so they can fight off sickness when they come in contact with it. So that's the ultimate goal here and what I strive for all year round, but especially here in these fall and winter months. So we'll first talk about prevention, and then at the end, I'll tell you some things that we do implement when someone does become sick. So that's just kind of how I'm going to go through this video. Number one, this is not going to be a surprise to any of y'all who watch my channel regularly, but keeping your diet almost perfect in the fall and winter months. And I know perfect is a very strict word, but as a mom, I know that the food we put in our body is either helping us or hurting us. It's not in between. There's no in between there. It's either a food that's helping us, it's medicinal food, it's helping us to stay strong, healthy, boost our immune system, or it's hurting us. It's toxic, it's poison, it's dragging us down. Our body's having to process it out, and it's harmful to us. So there's only two really groups of food, helpful or harmful. And if you look at food that way, I think it makes it a lot easier for the food choices that you offer your family, you offer your kids. So let's, when I say a perfect diet all year round, we're not this strict. My kids are at a birthday party or a family event, at a holiday event, I'm not gonna forbid them from having something that they're asking. I'm not gonna let them go overboard, of course, but I'm not gonna forbid them in that small instance. But for the most part, year round, we are eating very, very, very well, very nutrient dense foods. One or two instances is not going to hurt us, but going into these fall and winter seasons, I'm a lot more cautious about those things that they come in contact with. And it may sound crazy, and you may be like, well, that one piece of candy or that one slice of cake is not going to hurt them, and it's not. But what it does is temporarily suppress the immune system in your children or as an adult, and if they come in contact with something, they are more likely to catch it. So again, they may not, they might. I just want to be more careful about it in the colder seasons. So I'm not like crazy obsessive about it, but I am more on alert of what we're eating, making sure we're eating those extremely nutrient dense, high quality foods in these coming seasons. We do that all year round, but I'm just very more aware of it in these colder months upcoming. So if we have a healthy body, like I said, it's less likely to get sick. So let's just give an example like this. If we are constantly putting processed foods in our bodies, foods that our body does not recognize, foods that are not from God, that are grown here on this earth, raised here on this earth, foods that are made in a lab, chemically made, chemically packaged foods. When our bodies are continually having to break that down, try to process it, try to filter out what's in those foods, it's so bogged down from those processed, toxic, poisonous foods, it can't fight off a sickness. Why would we expect it to be able to fight off a sickness? So when we are eating those kinds of foods and then we're hit with a sickness from someone we come into contact with, our body just can't fight it. So that is why it is so important in all the time, but especially in the more readily sickness months, to be very careful about what you're feeding your family, letting your kids have as far as processed foods. I talk a lot about snacky processed foods and getting your kids off those foods in another video. I'll link that below if you are kind of stuck in your kids only wanting processed foods and you're like, well, I can't get them to eat anything but this type of food, so how am I gonna get them off of it, especially in these colder months upcoming? So I'll link that video below that gives some tips on how we approach that. So maybe that'll be helpful. But as I was saying, if we were constantly putting those foods in our body, it can't fight off a sickness. I mean, we can't expect it to. It's already so bogged down fighting this poisonous, toxic stuff off. It's harder for it to fight off a sickness. Just having that good foundation to start with in your diet is going to help you prevent sickness altogether. So I'll tell you all the foods we focus on all year round, but even more so here in the fall and winter months. These are things you'll have heard about if you've been on my channel, but things such as raw milk, bone broth, organ meats, high quality animal fats, eggs, and fermented foods. One of our favorite fermented foods is fermented garlic. I've shared I think a reel, like a short form video on how we make fermented garlic. Maybe I haven't. If I haven't, I will, but we consume fermented garlic all the time through the cold and winter months as a preventative, but any fermented foods is going to keep that gut healthier to fight off the sickness. So those are the top foods we focus on that I make sure I'm getting my kids in these months so that their bodies are strong, they're eating nutrient dense food, and they can fight off sickness when they come in contact with it. Number 2 is getting outside, lots of outdoor play. And this is another one that we've all heard. We all know that we should be getting outside, getting our kids outside playing, but in these colder months, a lot of times it's more difficult. But I just have to remember and encourage myself that the more my kids are outside, the more they're in nature, the healthier they will be. The slower paced life that brings, the slower paced life that we live, the less stressed we are. Our pace of life and our mental stability also relates a lot to sickness. If we're overly stressed, overly stimulated all the time, we are more likely to get sick. If our kids are constantly on TVs, tablets, phones all the time, they're getting that overstimulation. It's all related to their health, and just the slower pace, less stimulating life leads to a healthier life in our experience. So being outside, living slower, taking our time doing things, having our kids in nature as much as possible is another way we help to prevent sickness all year round, but even more so in these colder seasons upcoming. So that is the main reason I think people get sicker in the colder months, is because they're inside so much more. They're not getting outside in the sun. The sun is not often out as much in the winter months. Some areas of the world, there is very little to no sun in the winter months. So we have to fight even harder to stay healthier when there is no sun to give us that boost. I'm a firm believer in the sun is very healing. God gave us the sun as a healing element, and we should fully embrace it, be outside, look at his beauty, and just be in nature. So y'all have heard me talk about being outside a lot, but that's just your encouraging reminder to try your best to get outside, even when it's cold, dreary, wet, damp, and you'd much rather be inside curled up with a book or watching a movie. It is so important for our health. We have things we have to do outside, so it's easier. We know we have to get outside to do certain things for our animals, for our homestead, but it's often easier for my husband or I to do it ourselves. It's quicker for us to just get out and do it, but I have to remember that my kids need to be outside too. I need to encourage them to come outside with me and just slow the pace down, enjoy our time outside, get our tasks done, and then enjoy the slower pace that being outside brings. So that's just your friendly reminder to get outside through these next months, even when it's not as enjoyable as it is in the spring and the summer months when we all love being outside. Okay, number 3, I'm going to talk about a little bit of the supplementation that we do use as a prevention, and then I'll talk about some of the things we do when someone is actually sick. So I don't give my family lots of supplements. I take supplements, especially when I'm pregnant, breastfeeding, just because I know my body needs those extra nutrients, especially in those stress states that pregnancy and breastfeeding can bring. But the rest of my family really doesn't supplement that much. We focus so much on that nutrient dense diet that I talked about at the beginning of this video that I don't find the need for tons and tons of supplementation. So the ones that we do focus on all year round, like I already mentioned, is organ meats. That's mainly beef liver, organ meats just in general. That's just a way I get nutrient dense food into my family's diet. We can use it in the form of supplementation. I've used both, but that is my number one supplement. People don't think of liver and organ meats as a food, but it is just a food. A lot of times we're like, oh, I've got to take my beef liver supplements, but that's just a food. It's just a food that we are not used to eating nowadays. They were very keen on eating that several hundred years ago that was just a food, but now it's a supplement. But we shouldn't really think of it that way. So that's one of the main ones I make sure to get into my family is organ meats. I have talked about how I sneak organ meats into our broths, into our soups. My youngest daughter and I eat liver pate all the time. Now the one we do all year round is garlic. I already talked about fermented garlic. We will consume raw garlic or fermented garlic pretty much every few days in these colder months, just because it's a preventative for getting sick. Garlic is so healing. God made this amazing antibacterial, antimicrobial food that is so healing for us. There's so many benefits for us in just general healing, just life overall. Garlic is so healing. I think that is one of the most underrated foods that we could all be eating and consuming to keep our health. My younger two children absolutely love fermented garlic. They'll just eat it by the handful. My oldest is a little more hesitant. He likes to drink it with juice, but fermented garlic and the organ meats are one we have all the time. As kind of people think of this as supplements, it's really just real foods. I'm just making sure to get into my family. Another thing is herbal tea infusions. Tea is so minerally, nutritionally rich. I have all of our teas back here on my shelf. I used to keep them tucked away in my pantry and in my hutch, but then I just moved them out to my kitchen. So I all the time see them and I'm reminded that this is a way I can keep my family healthy, is making tea infusions. I'll just make some tea, let it infuse in the refrigerator for a couple of days, and then that's just a really minerally rich, nutrient dense drink we can sip on all year round. And especially in the winter months, we drink it cold, we drink it warm, and it's just another way to keep nutrient dense minerals in my family's diet. Another one is the fermented foods. I already talked about that all the time. I'm trying to sneak fermented foods into my family, whether it be the garlic, the things like sauerkraut, kefir, yogurt. All of those fermented foods are good for our gut. We all know this. We've heard this before. It's just, like I said, I just want to remind you and encourage you in this video on some of these things that sometimes we forget to do, and then we find ourselves sick and we're looking to outside sources to heal us when we had all the knowledge all along. We might have just forgotten a few things. So it's the only true supplements that I give my kids regularly, and my husband and myself, are magnesium. That is a very important one that is not in our diets anymore, in our water system. So we take magnesium in the liquid form, magnesium in the supplement powder form, magnesium in the spray form, magnesium in the salt form. I'm always getting magnesium into my family. When I'm here talking about supplements, I just want to warn you to be cautious about supplements, because so many supplements today are made to make money, like much of the healthcare system. And there are supplements that are promoted to be healthy and healing, but they're really very synthetic and chemically altered and fake. So one of the ones that comes to my head right off the bat is vitamin C supplementation. Vitamin C is just the vitamin you get from citrus fruits, so lemons, oranges, limes, but you can take it in supplementation form. But most of those supplementation forms of vitamin C are fake. They're ascorbic acid. They're not actually vitamin C that will be found in nature. So just be cautious when you are looking at supplements. There's so many supplements now that are geared to the health and wellness industry that are just to make money. They're not actually looking out for our health. They're not actually healthy. So that's why we stick to so many just nutrient dense food and don't depend so much on supplements. Yes, my kids eat all of these things that I've talked about, the fermented foods, the liver. I have to sneak that in sometimes, but I am able to get them to eat it. And we are constantly talking with our children about health and being healthy and why we live this way. And they've just grown up in a health and wellness home. My husband and I did not. And my husband and I were not like this when we first got married. We have truly evolved into all of this and researched all of this and what I'm sharing with you here. So my kids have just grown up in this. They haven't seen a lot of unhealthy processed foods unless we're out and about places. So they just know that we eat these types of foods. We prioritize this lifestyle for our health and wellness. And we constantly are talking with them about that, about why this food, how this food helps us stay healthy, and why such foods are not healthy for us, how those are harmful to our bodies. And when we eat these foods, we might not feel as well and we might get sick more often, and they understand that. So we often enough don't give kids credit for understanding these types of things. And if we just talk to them about it, about why we choose to live this way and eat this way, they're much more likely to want to join us in being healthier and not getting sick through the winter months, because who really likes to get sick? Lastly, I wanted to add, many people might think that well, your kids are home, they're not in school, they're not in daycare, they're going to be less sick. And yes, while I believe that is true, kids who are home are less sick, but I don't think it's just because they're not around other sick kids as often. Yes, they're around less germs, they're around less people, but there's a lot of other factors I think go with that, because my kids have been around sick people, sick family members, sick friends, and we come home and I realize that person was sick, or they'll call us the next day and tell us they had such and such, and I'm like, oh goodness, we're about to be faced with a sickness, and then my kids and my family stay perfectly healthy. So it does ultimately boil down to your lifestyle, but there's a couple of things that I think play into. In schools and daycares, I don't think kids are outside as often. That plays into it, and at schools and daycares are not fed as really a good diet at all. I'll just say it, it's not a good diet at schools and daycares, the ones that we've been around and been to. So I think there's other factors that play into kids, people that are outside at those places that seem to get sick more often. So I don't mean to offend anybody here. I'm just really stating what I've observed, ways that we try to prevent sickness and heal sickness when they come out. I told you I was going to talk about when someone actually is sick, but I kind of already have hit on that. When someone in our family gets sick, we immediately start eating garlic. I make some huge batch of soup filled with garlic, bone broth, stewed meats, usually some type of organ meat, and we all eat on that as soon as anyone in our family gets sick. So we really aren't taking a lot of medication, supplementation. We don't turn to those things. We turn to food first. And then if I need to, we will, of course, outsource something if it's serious and we need to go that route, but so far we haven't had to, at least with my children. There's been times where my husband has gotten sick and the rest of our family has stayed well, because we're taking these preventative measures at the first sign of sickness and just general health and wellness all year round. So I feel like I've been all over in this video because I've had kids calling me, dogs barking, and I hope that this video comes together and makes sense. I hope it's encouraging that you can heal your family. You have the power and the knowledge. You just have to do some research, gain some knowledge in this area, and trust your intuitions. Praying you have a healthy, safe fall and winter month going into this sickness season, and I will talk to y'all in my next video.